So good afternoon, everyone. I realize we are the last sessions before you guys want to go back to the hotel and watch all those sessions that you missed today that were recorded. So, before we start, let's do an introduction. So my name is Roel Schellens, and I'm an architect within Microsoft. I'm responsible for a lot of the early deployment programs within Microsoft, especially around Windows 10. The TAP program, probably familiar with you, and maybe a bit less familiar is First Wave, where the TAP program closely works with engineering. The deployment program is a program where we work with customers to make sure that when we release a product, we have customers that have deployed it in an early stage. And next to me, we have Sumit.
Hi, all. My name is Sumit Parekh. I work for Microsoft Intune team. So Intune, as you know, it's the mobile device management, and we manage Windows, iOS, Android, and Windows Phone devices. I'm a program manager on the Intune team. My major area is around Windows Intune, like all the enrollment areas, policy management, and endpoint protection, which is Defender and other stuff in Intune.
Good. And today we're going to talk about Windows 10 for mobile devices. Get and stay in control of your mobile fleet. At the end of the day, because it will be the end of the day, we'll be giving away a 930. But to win that 930, you have to stay till the end, because then we will tell you how to win that 930. Yeah, of course.
Yep. Of course.
Clicker is not working, so we do it the other way. So the goals of this session is to understand how to manage Windows 10 mobile devices. Mobile devices are not necessarily phones. It can be any Windows device that is managed in a mobile way. So you will see for a lot of the session that we will be talking about MDM-like management. So understand Windows 10 mobile device management architecture. So how does that work in the background? And I'll also explain why that is so important to understand. Understand the life cycle of Windows 10 mobile device, so from an enrollment to an unenrollment, and understand the new features of Windows 10 for mobile devices. So what is coming in Windows 10 that is new. So there are a lot of features and settings that you can configure today, but the investment we have put in Windows 10 is quite significant from an MDM perspective. So we've done actually two things. So first of all, we added a lot of functionalities if you want to manage your devices through a mobile way, so through an MDM. Secondly, we have done a unification through all the settings. So where in the past, when you did settings in Windows Phone, you might need to use different settings to achieve the same thing on Windows Desktop if you would manage them in the same way. So we have now unified that so that it is all identical. Of course, there will be some settings that you maybe have on a phone that you never would have on a desktop that are related to a telco kind of settings, but in general, they are all unified and the same. And you will see that the settings will be where in Windows 8.1 we had more settings for phone, now all the settings will be identical. So let's talk about the architecture of how Windows 10 mobile device management is structured. So first of all, there are many ways to manage devices. So we can manage a device through Config Manager. Most of you will be familiar with that. Config Manager client in general uses the WMI interface to manage settings on devices. Then we have Exchange Active Sync, very important protocol because it is still used for a lot of mobile devices out there. Of course, there is the provisioning engine. We'll talk about that shortly as well. And this is mainly to pre-provision phones or desktops to your end user so that when they get them and boot for the first time, everything will be configured according to your corporate policies. And then we have the mobile device client, the MDM client, the OMA DM client, which now is available in any version of Windows. And that is what we will be talking about for the majority of this track. And the OMA DM client, like I said, is available on any device. And in the middle, we have the common device configurator, and the common device configurator then communicates with where we do the settings. The settings in MDM, they are called configuration service providers. And configuration service providers is what you could compare with what we have in an Active Directory joint environment with group policies. So, and then we also have the WMI providers, of course, for desktop PCs. So you would still be able to manage them. One thing I want to point out is that the other reason we have is the WMI bridge is to ensure that config manager clients can also set CSPs. So if we have a setting that you can only do through CSP, then if you know how to configure that through WMI, or if the config manager team has implemented that through WMI, then you would still be able to configure that, even if it is a CSP. And because those CSPs are now as well on mobile as on desktop, you will be able to set them for both. So a configuration service provider is an interface to read, modify, or delete configuration settings. So compare them with group policies. And they are being defined in a file called syncml. And that file contains all the information that the device will need to configure that setting as how you have configured it, or as you want it to be configured. So how does that look like in a picture? So on the left-hand side, we have the MDM. The MDM, they will send a syncml file. That syncml file contains all the information. I'll show you in a second how a syncml file looks like. Then the syncml file is received by the MDM client. The common device configurator will do the interpretation and the translation. Well, this is for this CSP. And a CSP is shown in green, and this is a sample CSP. That this is the one that where you can request the latitude, longitude, altitude of the device, so you can see where the device in the world is. So the device will send that back. It's always a GET request, and basically you will then get back from the device. But it could also be a configuration of the minimum password length, and that is this clicker is unfortunate.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. That is this this setting. So in most MDM, with most MDM providers, you configure it through the graphical user interface. So what you just saw, the syncml file, where you configure basically what happens in the background, is what will happen if you configure here the interface. So it's not important that you can read everything what is on here, but basically what we are doing here is we're setting the minimum password length to 6. So in the background, what will happen then if we set the minimum password length to 6, of course the MDM will see to which devices is this policy targeted, then this syncml is sent to those devices. And you will see the device unique ID on top. I'll just highlight the ones in red, which are important to understand. Then you have the OMA URI, which is the actual setting of the CSP that we are going to set. In this case, it is the minimum password length. And then at the bottom, you see the value, which is a 6. So that was what we previously saw in the slide, was the minimum password length in the GUI. This is how it would look like in the background. So you would ask yourself, okay, why do I need to know this when I move to a Windows 10 world? So you've probably heard this week that Windows 10 is going to be offered as a service, meaning that updates and new features and functionality will come along at regular points in time. Meaning that it could be that those features and functionalities will be there, so the CSPs will be in the operating system, so you could target them, but they will maybe not be already in the MDM that you are using. So if you know what the CSP is, and that will all be documented, and we'll come to that, and well, these are two places where you can find that documentation. On the left-hand side, it is a site from the Intune team. It was only released last week, I believe. But what they are doing here is they keep this up to date over time, and they will add all the OMA URIs that you can configure to make sure that you could already implement those features before maybe the MDM has implemented them. No matter which MDM solution you would use, as long as they support custom URIs. And on the right-hand side, you see the MDM version of this, and this is more for, or MSDN version of this, and this is more for developers and goes in a lot more detail.
Okay, so after the brief introduction of what the CSP is, how do you configure, I'm going to show you how things work in Intune world, which is exactly what Roel said. So we come to Intune. How many of you have already seen the Intune console before? Just cool. So if you come to Intune, you come to policies and you try to create your policies for your mobile devices. You can click add. Since it's Windows, we go to the Windows world and try to create all the policies. Now, if you notice here, as you guys know already, today we have most of our policies, all the UI policies in a mobile device security policy template, which is a gigantic template where you can see all the policies which we ship today, but that's across platforms. So the UI which Roel showed is creating a minimum password length here, where you can say you want it to be 6, 8, whatever password length you want. Now this is a little confusing. We've heard feedback from the customers that, if I want to create only for Windows, why do I have to go and, look at a template which has Windows, Windows Phone, iOS, Android, everything here. So in future, you will not have to go to the mobile device, common mobile device settings. Each platform will have its own configuration policies here. So you'll see another template which will only be for Windows policies. In fact, you can see that we already have one Windows configuration policy, which applies for Windows 8.1 today. And shortly, you'll also see Windows 10 configuration policies. So all the UI policies will be here in these templates. Now, as Roel mentioned, we are going to ship Windows faster cadence, right? Like, new capabilities will come as soon as possible. Now, the thing is, as from MDM perspective, we may not be able to really build all the UI and everything around it to help you configure those policies. We can do that today by something called as a custom policy. So till we give you the UI, and don't take me, take me seriously here. The UI is the right way to set policies because you get the end-to-end compliance and all the rich reporting. But just as a stopgap, till we bring it in the UI, you can create custom policies. You can try with it. You can even have those policies if you need it immediately right now out of the box. But once you ship UI, we would recommend you to switch back to the UI policies because that gives you a rich end-to-end capability. But you can go ahead and create custom policies. Again, today in the production environment, you just see a Windows Phone custom policy out there. But this is just a special tenant which I've created just for this demo purpose, where in future you will also see a Windows 10 custom policy separately. And this will work both for Windows 10 mobile as well as for Windows 10 desktop scenarios. So yes, you won't be able to try this in your production environment today, but shortly you will try this, where the idea is you come to this custom policy, you create a custom policy, and for any new features, you can just say, I want to create a custom Windows 10 policy, and you can add policies. Now, how do I get to these values, right? Okay, so the idea is, you already saw the documentation which MSDN has, a bunch of CSPs, the new CS will be added there, and you can easily go ahead and figure out what the policies are, but it's kind of little tedious work for you to go to the CSP, find the path, find the values you want. So as Roel mentioned that we already have this TechNet documentation updated, where we have bunch of policies which we support today in custom URI, and it's very easy for you. So let's say if I want to create a custom, let me take a Bluetooth policy, right? So the way I do it is, I just copy the URI path here. I just say a custom Bluetooth. Okay. I see whether data type is integer. So in my data types, I just select integer. I just copy paste the path. And the value which I can put, I said, yes, don't allow Bluetooth. So if I want to block Bluetooth on my devices, I can say 0. If I want to allow Bluetooth, I can say 1. So let's say if I want to block Bluetooth in my organization. So it's that simple. The policy is created for you. Again, these are a few more steps. In UI, you will have all this richness where we have the setting, say allow Bluetooth or not. You can just say yes or no. Okay, but till we fill that gap in the UI, you can come here and create custom policies. So today with technical preview for Windows 10 builds, whatever you have, all the new capabilities in Windows 10, you can create custom policies and you can deploy them and test those features. And you just have to save the policy, and once you save, it will say, do you want to deploy it? And you can say yes, and you can deploy it to any user groups or device group you want to. So it's that simple. Just create a policy and say, yes, I want to deploy it to a user group. You can add the user group here, and you can just publish it. That's it.
Thank you.
Yes? Yes, you can do custom URF hybrid as well, but you have to wait for Windows 10 specific. You have to wait for the SP2 release, which we are doing in coming month. So yeah, there's service pack releasing in less than a month, I'm sure, but you will have that capability. Today you have in a hybrid environment the capability to do it for Windows Phone 8.1, but for 10 you will have to wait for the service pack. But in Intune you can do this today in production environments and test all your Windows 10 devices.
Should you release a new template or whatever that has the new feature, will you support going back through automatically and taking my custom policy and going, oh, I can just make this non-available now?
We've heard this, but a lot of time customers come back and, I mean, technically it's feasible, but a lot of time customers come back and say, we don't really want you to do this for our auditing purposes and stuff like that, because they don't want to really somebody do behind the magic and create a policy and deploy it to the users, and it kind of like, it really causes problem for their audits and what's happened, and they really want to manage, since it's a policy, it's a sensitive thing to do. Customers really want to manage and have the change management around it. When do they set the policies and what users, and when do they change things? So technically it's feasible. It's a technical world. Anything is feasible. But we have heard back from customers saying, we really don't want you to do that automatically.
So let's look at the life cycle of a device. A device is enrolled, and that enrollment could also be, you could also replace that word enrollment with provisioning. So you can use bulk provisioning. There is a simple bootstrap where you can enroll. I'll go into that a little bit deeper in the following slides. There is a converged protocol now between Windows Mobile and Windows 10 Desktop. So it all works in the same way. And the main new thing, and you might already have seen that, is the Azure AD integration, where when you do an Azure AD enrollment, or an Azure AD join, you have an MDM enrollment triggered as well automatically. So from an inventory perspective, we also got a lot of feedback that we need more inventory, especially on the MDM side. So that has been improved as well. There's a lot more there. Oops, sorry. And the biggest piece of where you see the majority of new policies will appear is in the devices and configuration and security settings. So when the device is enrolled, an inventory happens, of course, and from that moment when the device enrolls, it will also get configured with all its settings that you configure. So there are many new things there, an extended set of policies. We have context-based policies. We now also support, and that is very important, especially for the customers that were using certificates, that were requiring certificates that require private keys to be used on multiple devices. We now also support a push of a certificate in the PFX type of way to the end user, where the end user doesn't know that that certificate is deployed to him or her, but at least he or she can then use that certificate. I'll go into that a little bit more. Of course, there is more support around Wi-Fi and VPN. There are many more on them. I'm not going to read them all. The application management has a huge improvement. We can now integrate with the store. We have more capabilities around how we install applications. For example, if you have Windows 10 Desktop, you can now also install Win32. If you have Windows Mobile, you have more capabilities around how to install Apex, but also an integration with AppLocker, for example. On the remote assistance, we have some new features around, or improved features, I should say, around remote lock, pin reset, etc. Find your device, and then the unenrollment, which also integrates with all the new features and capabilities of Windows 10. So, for example, if we talk about EDP, Enterprise Data Protection, that also integrates with the unenrollment of the device. Or when we have done an Azure AD join and we unjoin that device, it also unenrolls, so all those things are linked together. So there is an integration.
We'll move next.
The first thing I want to mention, and you might already have seen that in many of the demos, but the experience from which device you will be using in Windows 10 is identical. So here you see the desktop and Windows Phone. And if you, for example, would make that screen, what you have on the left, smaller, you would see exactly the same interface as you see on the phone. So this makes it very easy for the user where to find settings, how to configure settings, and in this case, what we are showing is an enrollment that will look identical as well. So if you ask the user to enroll the device, it would be the same as on a desktop as it would be on Windows Mobile or a phone in this case. So I already spoke about auto MDM enrollment with Azure AD. So it can happen in two different ways. The first one is the out-of-box experience, or the UBI experience. So meaning that I get a device, I boot it for the first time, and I'm asked, is this a corporate device, or is this a personal device? If I say it is a corporate device, it will go to the next screen and will show that, and you will be asked to type in your Azure AD account. You type in your Azure AD account, it logs into Azure, and it also bootstrapped an enrollment into your MDM. So, for example, Intune. The other one is through all settings. So if you already have an existing device, you can go into settings, and that is the one that I showed on the first slide. And you click, on the first slide I showed you how to enroll, but you could also go into System About, and we'll show that in a second, and say Azure AD join this device to my environment, and you get the same experience. And then the enrollment also takes place for the MDM. The other thing that you can do with Windows 10 is you have a lot more options around provisioning packages. So you will need the Windows Image and Configuration Designer for that. I believe it's available in the ADK. And what you can do with that is you can create a package, and that package can be installed through removable SD or USB card. You can use NFC. Well, why would NFC be a nice scenario? Well, a scenario that I've heard is, for example, if you are in a factory and you want to enter a room where they design new things that haven't been published yet, you could just wipe your phone or whatever you're using next to an NFC. The policy would kick in to disable the camera or something like that, and when you then walk out again, you scan the phone again over that NFC and your camera is enabled again. So that type of scenarios will then be possible through this type of scenario. So it's not only from first use when someone gets the device, but also with that sort of scenarios. So what can be provisioned with the Windows Image Configuration Designer? The initial setup, of course, but I mean, there are many things that can be configured, but very typical are the MDM enrollment. And that is the most important one, why I want to show you this. But you can configure things like modern applications. Certificates is an important part. Wi-Fi is often important because customers want a mobile device to be connected to the network as soon as possible, but also things like VPN and start screen customization.
Yep, and Wi-Fi is also needed for MDM enrollment. So once the device boots up, the first thing, if it tries to do enrollment, it needs Wi-Fi. So if it's connected, you can even enroll into MDM.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me switch to the demo of Azure AD Join. So does anybody really understand why we're doing Azure AD Join? I mean, the short answer is you guys loved MSA for enterprise, right? I mean, cool, right? End user has to configure the device, but they have to still stick with their MSA for all the stuff, and they can have all their enterprise scenarios they have to still do with their MSA account. I mean, that's fun, right, for enterprise to manage. That's the biggest pain which we are solving. The idea is your end users will have a way to configure the device for work and log in with their corporate credentials, not just their MSA credentials. Okay, so I'm going to try to demo that. And the demo is a user walks in, and they're trying to configure that device for work. And end of the day, when the flow is completed, the device will show up in Azure AD as well as in MDM. So in your enterprise, if you have MDM, you don't have to tell your user to join to Azure AD and then do MDM enrollment. It's two separate steps. You just go once, and you'll be able to just have the device record both in Azure AD and in Intune MDM. So end of the day, user can just log in with the credentials, and all the MDM policies and everything can be directly pushed to the device. So less headache for IT, less headache for end users. Let me just show. So here's my Intune, and here's one of my user called Santosh. As you can see, I'm refreshing it. Santosh only has one device, which is a Windows Phone, and I'm using that for some other demo. So only one device, and this is my Azure management portal. I have drilled down to my user, and just to make sure that I'm not cheating, I'm going to show you that Santosh has no device enrolled into Azure. Okay, so nothing spoofy here. You all say that Santosh has no user, and in Intune, Santosh has only one user because he just managed into Intune manually. He didn't choose to make it a corporate device. Okay, so that's the scenario. Now Santosh logs in, and let me again go back what Roel said. There are two ways to make this device a corp device, right? You want to really have it corp identity and log in with corp identity. One way is to go through the UBI process itself when you are creating the device, booting the device for the first time. And the other is choose not to do that at that moment, but after the fact you think, I want to really do work on this device, I can add it to my Azure domain join and my corporation here. So the demo I'm going to show you is user already logged in and going it through the settings, but after that I also go through the workflow of how it will look like for UBI process. So if the user is already logged in, you can see it's just a local user named Santosh. It's not my corporate user. I come here, settings, I come to the systems, I come to about, and here you have the magic button called join to Azure AD. User clicks, join to Azure AD, and the user is saying, okay, after you enter your work or school account, so it could be for my organization, for my work, or for my school. I'm a student, I'm using it for my school purpose, so you can use your work or school account, and it will just enroll it. So let me click continue. Here, you have to bear with me, my user is a very good long user. And this is a special domain we created. We couldn't find a shorter name. Okay. Wrong password. Maybe it's wrong. Only if I can type correctly today. As you are. There you go.
They probably did it on purpose.
Just to show it fails.
No, give you a complex.
Okay, so once you provide your credentials, user will be authenticated. As you saw, that the authentication failed because my user was not correct. Here it will just give you a information warning that, make sure this is really your organization which you're trying to join, because then you're going to be pushed to all the organization policies. So yeah, Santosh knows that, yes, I am part of Ignite demo tenant, so I'm going to say join. And what happens behind the scene here is the device is, so the user is authenticated against Azure in the tenant and make sure the user exists in Azure. The device is the right type of device which he can enroll into Azure. After the authentication and authorization is finished, the user entry, device entry is created in Azure AD, and Azure will also point to the device saying, you know what, your organization also has an MDM. The information will come down from Azure to the device, and device then also authenticate with Intune or other MDM, and authentication will finish, and then the authentication also completes. So at this point, when you see finished, the device is into both the systems. So before I show you the device in both the systems, let's show you also the experience for what's the experience for the UBI process. So let's assume that you just unboxed your device, you just started it for the first time. One of the screen you land up here which says, set up. Do you want to set up your device?
Yeah, so one thing, what you're seeing is maybe not completely identical now. It will in the end be identical, the experience. The reason why it's not identical is, and what you're seeing might also change because this is just early code. What you're seeing here is just from the current build 174, what the experience would be in there.
Quick question. Yes, we're seeing a new device, but how do I handle the scenario where an existing enrolled form on this 8.1 gets upgraded? Do I have to unenroll and re-enroll in that situation?
Into MDM?
Well, I'm already enrolled, but I upgrade to Windows 10.
Yes, you don't have to unenroll and re-enroll after Windows.
But I'll still be associated with my MSA account if I want to do the AD.
Yes, so if you want, you will be given an option upfront again if you want to do it. And so if you are upgrading, you'll be still given an option to go ahead and give your AD credentials. At that point, it will enroll into AD, but Intune is already enrolled, so you don't have to worry about it. Yep, the device will not double enroll into Intune. Okay, so here there's a heads up which says similar heads up which you have seen, you're going to enroll into your organization, so make sure that's the right organization you're enrolling into. You provide a similar username and password here. It will just, if it's a federation scenario, it will federate it to your on-prem for credentials. Once it is done, you will see the user can enroll with just log in with his corporate credentials. So user doesn't have to now log in with his MSA accounts at all. Okay, you can even add MFA in this process, multi-factor authentication, if your organization wants a stricter authentication to make sure that nobody can just steal somebody's password and enroll their devices. You can even add multi-factor authentication in this process. So the user will be, second factor of authentication will kick in where the user might be given a call or some other text message for authentication. I don't have those screens, but you can even add that. So once the device sets up, this is another cool thing which you may want to add to your flow, which is at this point, if you are going to enable passport, which you guys might have already heard a lot in all the different sessions, but we're going to also cover passport a little later. But if you want to add passport for your login, you can, user will be asked to set up their passport pin here. So from there onwards, no more username and password, it's just the passport pin they can use to log into the device. Okay, and then that's it. Now the user can just log in. Okay, so let me just quickly switch back and show you. So let me refresh this. And you can see my Santosh PC is here in Intune. So the device is already in Intune, and let me show you AD. Let me just go back and come here. And here's my device is in Azure AD. So my device is all set up for my corporate access, all my single sign-on, everything could be there. I don't have to worry. I can log in with my corp credentials, and I'm good to go at this point. Even Intune policies will start flowing, so might take a little while, but let me see. I'm just going to go into the device and see if the policy is already flown. Yes, the policies are flown, and those devices comply with those policies. So it's quick. The device already has the policies. One of the policies which I can try to show you is I blocked the Defender UI on the device. So if you just go to update, you go to Windows Defender, my end user will not be able to launch the Defender UI because technically they can change their policy. So it was that simple. If it was an UBI process, I could have gone through the UBI process, enrolled it, my device, all my devices created throughout my organization, wherever it's needed, and my policy comes down seamless. I don't have to worry about anything else. Cool. Now let's go back.
Yep, and don't forget the third way to enroll, and that is to the provisioning package. So we don't have a demo of that, but that is a way to do that as well. The other thing I want to mention still on Passport is, Sumit already spoke about it, but the thing that is asked of the user is type your PIN, and then from there on, the PIN will be used to use that device. Before that will happen, when the user for the first time types in the password, that multi-factor authentication can happen. And that is because you're using Azure Phone Factor, it could be a one-time passport that you got from your administrator, or if you're happy with the normal passport, they can use the normal passport. This is not working again. So I already spoke about the inventory that has been extended, especially around the cellular network details. There were a lot of customers that were asking for that. I want to know the IMEI number of the phone. You probably have that in your own organization as well. I'm not going to read them all, and this slide probably doesn't contain all of them, but please remember there are a lot of new inventory settings that are now being collected through MDM. The other features and enhancements that are implemented from a Windows 10 perspective are also not all listed here, but these are the main features that you probably will see also this week and that will be announced. Is first of all the capability to manage Passport and Hello through MDM. That is something that is very important, especially for mobile devices. And mobile devices are not always connected to your network, so you really want to configure additional security. Second reason is that you want to make things as easy as possible for the end user. So an end user doesn't want to type in a complex passport on a phone. That device will not be used, and the productivity of that end user will also not be optimal. So you want to have a secure way for that user logging on and still be easy to log on for that user. So that's where we have Hello. So I'm also not going to talk a lot about Hello today. There are several other sessions, but that is where you can use or a fingerprint, iris scan, or facial recognition to unlock a device. And that integrates then with Passport. And for Passport, if you don't have biometrics on the device, you could also use a PIN instead. So the multi-factor authentication that Sumit was showing kicks in automatically when you have Passport enabled because there is something you have, which is the device. And there will be a unique key protected by the TPM on the device. So only if you because the question that is often asked, okay, if I then still capture the token of that user, can I still do pass the hash attacks? And the answer is no, because you need the device itself, as well as the unique way of how that user unlocks the device, and that could be the PIN, the fingerprint, iris scan, or facial recognition. Device update management, I'll talk about that a little bit because that is very important. That wasn't there yet in the previous version, and customers and enterprises want to manage and keep control over update management. Enterprise data protection, almost all of my first wave and top customers are really keen on getting EDP implemented in the organization, making sure that corporate data is secure. And if you read the newspapers about leaks and etc., you understand why that is. Conditional access, another thing. Why would you provide access to devices that are not secure and don't comply with certain policies? So you want to be able to validate that. And then we have a lot of enhancements, kiosk, security policies, VPN management, enterprise Wi-Fi, and certificate management. First of all, device update management. So although this is different on phone, and the reason why this is different on mobile is because most of the updates today go through a mobile operator, and therefore the update process is different. But mobile devices, like I said, can be desktop as well as phone. So if a tablet that you want to manage in a mobile way needs to be configured to control the updates, then you can still control that through the MDM in Windows 10 timeframe. So we now have a CSP that you see on the right that allows you to configure all those update settings. Yeah, can you click? Mm-hmm. And so you can, for example, control when and how they update, choose your source, Windows Update or company update server, so the Windows Server update server. And as they announced at the keynote earlier this week, you now also have the corporate or the enterprise Windows Update server. Yeah, next slide. So the other thing that is very important, and that is feedback that we got as well, and customers were asking, why don't you have something similar as, in this case, for example, with Intune, where you have conditional access for iOS and Android, but you don't have it for Windows. So that is now coming into Windows as well, Windows 10, where you can say, okay, prove to me that you are having the latest signature files for your anti-malware, or prove to me that you have these configurations in place, like, for example, a minimum passport length, etc., before I allow you to even access my resources. So what happens currently today is, please provide me access to your resource. Here you have access, for example, Exchange, if you want to configure access to your Exchange environment or SharePoint environment. So what will happen now with Windows 10 is that you have the capability, because we have a new CSP that will test the attestation of the device, is, okay, you want access to this environment, prove to me that you are healthy according to these policies. So the MDM evaluates the compliance through the health attestation CSP, so the MDM can really interrogate the client if that is true. So the device health attestation is provable, so you can compare it with what is jailbroken on iOS devices, so that MDM can detect that something is wrong with the device. So here it's also in Windows 10 really provable through hardware attestation. So, and then when that is in place, you can configure conditional access to applications like, for example, Azure Office 365, SharePoint, etc. So the next area where I was already talking about, which a lot of customers really need, is making sure that corporate data that goes to these devices, if it is a corporate-owned or bring your own device-owned, really is provided in a secure way and cannot leak to private or personal related sources like Twitter, Facebook, etc. And to do that, we have implemented Enterprise Data Protection. It's not the final name yet, so they might change that name. But really what it intends to do is to make sure that data, when corporate data lands on the device, is that it is tagged as being corporate or the company-related data, and that when that device is being lost and you need to wipe it, that the corporate data will be removed, or someone else gets the device, that the corporate data is encrypted, so no one will get access to that corporate data, but also to ensure that that corporate data cannot be shared with applications that are not allowed to use that. So Sumit will give a demo about that, but what will really happen is that you have two types of applications that can use EDP. So one type of application is the application where you just say this application is not allowed to share data with that application. But you also have enlightened applications. And with enlightened applications, they are aware of EDP. And this is where we really want to differentiate with Windows 10, where we can say, okay, we have, for example, Outlook on the phone, and that can be used for corporate as well as for personal information. So we want to tag the data, and then based on the data, we say, okay, you can interchange this data between applications. So, yeah, the example they use here is, for example, with Link, and you want to move something that someone IMs in Link to you, and you want to paste that in another application, and then you get the message, you're not allowed to, depending on how your policy is configured, but Sumit will demo that.
Okay, so you guys must have already seen the keynotes, right? Where Brad pretty much did the same demo, but I'm going to a little bit go deeper and also show you what's the IT pro experiences while configuring these policies. I mean, those are still the early mockups. Things can change, but I'm going to give you a glimpse of what it is. So from the end user perspective, my user has EDP policies being applied to the device. So my IT has configured the policies. All the policies are here. This is my managed application, like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, all the Office applications. In fact, as Roel mentioned, since these applications are enlightened, we can also say, like applications which are not enlightened, we can even call them to be managed. So I'm going to show you Foxit as an application which is not enlightened, but it will be managed in my organization. So here's the scenario. This is my travel expense report for this event. I'm just going to copy this and say, you know what, I want to copy my expense into my PowerPoint and send it to my manager. Well, I can do that in PowerPoint. You can see I can Control C and Control V in PowerPoint, no problems. I can even save it, and let me just save it in my computer and say expense. Okay, so everything is fair. Both the applications are managed. I could just copy from my one managed application to the managed application. Now the key thing is, you can see my expense PowerPoint is encrypted. Green might not be great to see, so I'll just show you the properties, and you can see it's actually encrypted. So that's the level of enterprise data protection we are doing. We know it's a corporate data, lives in this particular file, so data is encrypted. So you don't have to worry about where my data is, and if somebody grabs my laptop, is my data still safe? Yes, it's safe because it's encrypted on the device itself. Yes, it's MDM and RMS, everything you'll need. So you would definitely need RMS for encryption. Okay, so that's cool, but I have copied my data and I'm trying to put it on Twitter. I'm going to tweet about my expense for this event. You know what? I cannot. Paste it. Nope, I cannot. But just to show you that I can paste stuff in this Twitter, I'm just going to copy a demo content from my notepad, which is not managed. I'm just copying it. It's working. So it's simple. My data is protected. So if I just want to sneak out some data, which is my corporate data, into my Twitter or Facebook account, nope, it's not managed. So you cannot sneak out any of the corporate data.
Is there any way to prevent a message to indicate to the user that it's blocked or for a reason?
Yep. So let's see this in the notepad. Oops, sorry. I didn't copy stuff here. So let me again copy my corporate data. And I'm going to go into little detail of what the other options are, but I'm trying to paste here. So here the scenario I have is, as an IT admin, I've configured and said, you know what, I'll allow you to copy it, but I'll make sure that you're aware that if you copy it, it will be audited. So it's your discretion. You figure out if you want to paste it outside, but we'll audit you. So IT admins will get all the audit information of what applications the data has been moved into. So they have a control over figuring out, okay, I will give the end user the rights to do things, but I'll still have all the control to figure out what happened at what point of time.
But in the case that it's totally blocked, is there any user awareness?
So this is changing. This is just what I demoed it right now. Yes, it will change, and we're still working on what the end experiences be, but yeah, I agree. The user shouldn't be like, I'm trying to paste it, I'm seeing nothing happening. Yeah, I agree. But this is just intermediate builds yet. The experience will change.
Can you do anything to present or prevent pictures?
I'm sorry?
Pictures, like if I take a picture of the screen and paste it outside of the screen capture.
Yes, if you can prevent screen capture today in MDM.
No, if I take a picture on my phone and then paste it, that gets around this.
Yeah, so the scenario is, yeah, my data is secure, I don't care. I have my phone, which is the best way to leak it. I cannot paste it on Twitter, I can paste it and put it. Yes, we don't have those controls yet, where it's very difficult to say, if the device is protected, make sure the screen is also protected, and you cannot take a picture of a screen, which is still a way for end users to leak data today. But you can have policies on your devices where you can say camera is disabled, so end users cannot take pictures in your organizations. If you have corporate-owned devices, disable camera.
What's happening when you use like the well-known screen flipping tool for flex?
I'm sorry?
When you use the OneNote screen flipping tool for screen
Yep. But one.
copy Excel to the clipboard as an image,
Mhm.
can you paste it on there?
No, you cannot, because OneNote is also managed. You can copy it from your Excel or clipboard from OneNote, but once it's OneNote, sorry? Mhm.
Yeah, it's a
In
snipping.
OneNote, yes, but the data is in OneNote now. So OneNote is managed. Once you have it in OneNote, you cannot paste it from there into your Twitter account or any other account.
Print screen button on the keyboard so that it gets into memory of the system.
Yeah, print screen is what the scenario is not just OneNote. It's just say I just do a print screen of my Excel sheet and I just try to paste that picture over there. I don't know exactly, to be honest, what the print screen is, but I think we believe we can even control the print screen on the devices as well. That you cannot, the screen capture on Windows devices works as a print screen. We cannot do a print screen on the device. On phone, it's like you cannot do a screen capture like the snapshot of the phone, but it works in the same way as like a print screen on the Windows mobile devices. So if you want to really block that as well, you can just put an MDM policy which says, do not allow screen capture. So you cannot do print screens on the devices.
And keep in mind that this feature is not only implemented for people that want to leak data, but also people that by accident release data. That happens more often than people that do it on purpose. And the other thing is that when you have hackers and want to access this phone that is stolen or whatever, it's also to prevent that sort of scenario. So it's people that really want to steal data, they eventually will get to it anyway if they are an internal employee. But this is really to prevent those type of use cases.
Yep, so let me just quickly also demo.
Sorry, there's another question.
Oh, sorry.
So we've seen how this functions with like family-based, but what happens, say, I open up Firefox, which I'm assuming is not managed, go to email and try and upload that file. I'm envisioning from my security team asking me, well, Firefox or any app, so someone installs a malicious app by accident, is it going to look in your file folder, see that encrypted file, and be able to grab it and upload it? And yes, it's encrypted, but I work for quasi-government agencies, so we have DoD level security. If somebody really wants to break into that encrypted file, they're going to find a way to do it. So is there a way to prevent those apps, those unmanaged apps, from being able to see those files?
So unmanaged apps, so just to be honest, Firefox on this device is managed. You can have it managed as well. So as I said, it doesn't have to be any app on the device.
Browser that's not managed, somebody
So you cannot copy, you cannot copy in any non-managed app.
but they can't upload a file which is not using the clipboard. I'm talking just like browsing that file on the file share and uploading it.
But let's start at the beginning. So you define not only which applications are managed applications and are allowed to share that data, but you also define, okay, if the data comes from this source, and someone will show that in a second, from this IP address, this proxy, or this SharePoint site, then configure it as encrypted data. So as long as I don't, as I don't add that application, what I'm talking to the managed application list, there is no SDK required or whatever, you just add it to the managed application list. As long as that application is not there, it will never be able to get that data out of applications that are managed, which use data that comes from these sources that you have configured.
Yep. The whole idea is you have the second layer, which is encryption. So even if they copy the file, it's encrypted. So somebody opening outside will not be able to get to my file data. So, definitely you need Azure RMS and everything for that. But yeah, that's the whole idea. So I'm going to show you Foxit, which is also managed on this device. Okay, and I'm just going to create a Foxit file. So, and I'm going to show you that this file which is created from Foxit is also managed. So I'm just saving it in my same documents folder. And you can see even the Foxit file is green, which is encrypted.
So managed does mean nothing more than I have defined or approved this application to use EDP, encrypted
Enterprise data, basically.
Yeah.
And all the data which is created from these applications will be encrypted.
Yeah.
That's what management means. So let me just quickly show you how do we do this in Intune. And as I mentioned earlier, these are early mockups. So similarly, you come to configuration policies, you click add, go to Windows, and you see a enterprise data protection policy template. And you create the policy. You can just call it a demo policy. Okay. Now here is all the apps which you are defining in your organization. Like these are the apps which are managed. So these can open all the enterprise data, and any data stored by these apps will be encrypted. So you can create your list of apps you want. I mean, if you want to add an app, you can create a universal app where you just want to point to any of the store apps and say this store app, even if it's on the device, it's managed. Like you can make Twitter a managed app. So Twitter can, somebody can put data into Twitter, that's fine if the organization allows it. So they can define, or the typical standard desktop way where you can go ahead and say, you know what, any apps from this publisher or any apps which has this file name or product name, excuse me. Any apps which has this file name or product name, they'll be protected as well. So you can define all the apps which you want them to be protected in your organization. You can see I've even provided folder paths, like files under these folder will be all considered to be protected. Okay. Then the next step is you define what's your management mode. And here's to answer your question, you can define either you want to block completely, or you want to have it override, where end user can override it, but we still want to audit it. Or you want to say, you know what, don't do anything, don't let them copy, but we'll silently audit everything. Let them paste everywhere, whatever we just silently audit it. It's okay for us. Or you want to say, nope, block completely. It's completely free for end user. We don't want enterprise data protection in our organization at all. You just go ahead and everything is free for you. Okay? Then
Sorry, there's a question.
Go ahead.
How is that implemented on the client side? Is it a file system driver that interprets these managed applications?
So the question is, how is this managed on the client side?
How is it implemented for the client to protect these managed? Is it a file system driver?
So it's basically through the MDM channel, which Roel mentioned. So the CSP on the device, end of the day, when the policies are created, the CSP will know what all file types. So when any file, any application trying to open, it actually talks to the CSP first and say, okay, whether I'm managed or not managed. And CSP says, okay, you are managed, so you can get access to these files or this corporate data on your device. And if some other, like Notepad opens and it talks to the CSP and say, am I managed? Nope, you're not managed, so you cannot have access to any of the corporate data.
Yeah. And the other type of application that I mentioned earlier, enlightened applications, can also read that data from the CSP. So they know when data is EDP data or not.
Yep, you can also have define whether the app is enlightened or not. So you can define that in the policy. And by enlightened, we means the app itself will know in what user context it's running. So then Outlook knows whether I'm running in my corporate context or on my personal context. So it will.
And that is actually very important for a lot of customers, because if we now look at the containerization solutions that are out there with a lot of MDM solutions, is that the applications are basically boxed into this context where the user can work in, but that really requires to have proprietary web browsing applications, proprietary email applications, proprietary file sharing applications, which the user is not used to. It's not a very good user experience, and each time having to context switch between those different containers. And by really tagging the data itself, what is really important for the organization, because the application, everyone can download it or buy the application. It's really the data that is important for enterprises that needs to be protected.
So, did you get the question?
Like if I went to the Twitter website and then took enterprise information and copied the text from there, took it.
So you're asking if you do it the other way around, if you go from Twitter and you paste it into a managed
No,
application?
from an Excel sheet.
Internet Explorer is managed.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So you can even say whether you're,
And
yep. Yeah, you can, that's the same work because you at that point you have said IE is not my managed app. So if you define as an organization, say IE is not managed app, you cannot copy anything into your web browser at all. So you cannot even go for Twitter, you cannot even go through a web browser open to Twitter over there.
Yeah, it's now called Edge, by the way.
It's-
just to,
Edge.
For that, we do something similar. You have a managed browser that goes through the organizational proxies, you block all those websites, and then you have an unmanaged browser. And when Firefox or whatever that is going, you can let users do whatever, but they don't manage it, and you can't copy that.
Yep.
You block Twitter, Gmail, block
Yep. You can select what URLs end user can go on the managed browser. But that's again a two browser experience, which I believe we want to even solve that with the Edge, where we don't have to have the user have two experience. That should be unlighted, right?
Yep.
Where we don't have to really worry about multiple app experiences, a managed browser, which is much more slimmed down and stuff like that. So,
Most people have that two browsers anyways. Stuff on Edis, work on stuff like that.
Yep.
Will Edge allow like domain level definition for EDP? So, for example, I could let them go anywhere, but if you're on this particular domain, you're not allowed.
there you go. The next.
Right there you go.
So here you can define what's your boundary for
Good
your.
question.
That's a great question. Now you can define what's your boundary for your enterprise network, right? Where's your boundary? You can define your domains. You can define even your proxies, internal proxies, everything. You can just define this is my IPv6, IPv4 ranges, and say this is my boundary of my network. And any data in this boundary is protected. And any application, not just Edge, any application accessing data in this boundary, it will be protected. So you can then define your network boundaries, what you really want to be protected. And there are some other bunch of other basic settings for EDP and a data recovery. If in case a file, from the encrypted file, there's some data recovery, you can also push the data recovery certificates on the devices. Any other questions? Yes, sir. No, I think the gentleman behind you.
I'm trying to put together the pieces here for the use case of some of these things, like joining a device to Azure AD versus domain. Is this kind of like a scenario where the startups or whatever that have no infrastructure to actually use their entire, use Azure for everything, where they can join their systems, have their identity management, and then possibly lead to an eventual, like the O365 movement specifically they move their AD to? Is that what you guys are setting up here?
Yep. The whole idea is Azure AD is a single identity, right, for all
the
the
question.
services. Sorry, it's hard for me to repeat the question, but the question basically is are we moving towards Azure being the single identity, like even like with Office 365 or with Intune or any of the services, right? Where and for an enterprise, it's just one identity at one place. And yeah, that's I think what we are driving towards, where all the identity with all the different services or applications will be all through Azure AD. So for an enterprise, you don't have to worry about like Intune having its own identity and have to really create users over there and manage it in one place, or Office 365, I have to create something and then my Active Directory is something else, right?
Because these policies seem to be mimicking some of the use cases for group policies on-prem
Yep.
or Windows devices, but it's extending out across all platforms. So
Yeah, and let me make one thing clear. Mobile device management is not only for Azure AD and cloud-related services. So we will also offer options for mobile device management, especially on the Windows 10 side, to do that on-prem. And the config manager team is working on that as well to make that happen. And the other thing is that if you have a hybrid environment where you have an on-prem Active Directory and you have an Azure AD, when you join that mobile device to your Azure AD, the device registration, etc., make sure that the device is also known in your Active Directory, the user is known in your Active Directory, and those devices can be configured in such a way that they also have access to on-prem resources as well as in the cloud resources. So it is a full circle where you provide a mobile device management solution that has as well cloud as on-prem capabilities.
Yep.
But the way they are managed is different now, not through Active Directory. You will see that will become less and less when we go more and more to a mobile world and more through MDM, Azure AD, cloud type of scenarios.
Yep. So for a managed enterprise where you have everything in cloud, it's okay, all your data could be in cloud. For managed enterprise, Azure Active Directory could be a central identity. For an on-prem customers, you can have AD as an identity, and hybrid, you can have them both sync as well together. So, but then that's our identity source for all services and applications to have a common place for user and device identities.
It seems like the only thing you're missing now is local authentications to have an authenticating process.
Why would you need local authentication? So the question was, the only thing we're missing is local authentication.
Well, like, if you're at one of those sites or whatever, instead of sending the tokens across the pipe or whatever, I'd say where you would create sites in AD, having that local presence of authentication.
No, so like I said, so if you have a hybrid environment configured with Azure AD in the cloud and your domain controller here, so you have basically, you have three options. You only have Azure AD, you have Azure AD with Active Directory, and you sync the identities, and you can also do a passport sync if you would like to. And then you have the federated one, where you also have AD sync in between with your federation, where you say, okay, I trust everyone from this to access applications internally as well. So the token that is used, if it's passport or can be used as well on-prem as in any other location. So it works in a similar way, and for the end user, it's exactly the same experience so if he is on a different site, as if he was using his desktop on his computer with an AD joined machine. So that is where we want to go to. For the end user, it should be agnostic, but it should still happen in a secure way, of course. Where all those threats that you are reading about in the newspaper, with pass the hash, etc., where all those credit cards are stolen, that those are not possible anymore. Okay.
Okay. Now those are good questions. I mean, we have multiple architectures to support different scenarios. So yes, it's kind of not great, not so easy to understand all this, but yeah, there are different options as well. Yeah. Okay, so let's switch back.
So the last few things I want to talk about is new improvements in areas that have been requested quite a lot by customers. The first one is around VPN, and VPN is an area that, especially for mobile devices, is very important. So you want to make sure that those devices that are out there in the field have access to your resources in your on-prem, your network internally. And to do that, we most of the time use VPN solution with our enterprise customers. And one of the new features that we've implemented in Windows 10 that is now possible as well is to auto-connect VPN. The other one that we have is per application VPN. That is one that has been requested as well, meaning that you can now configure, okay, I want to set up a VPN connection, especially for this application, and only that application can use that channel. So the administrator can now control and isolate the network traffic as how it comes into your network. And that same Facebook application that you have on the same device is not allowed or it's not possible to use that same VPN connection. So you completely control which apps can use it. The other one that is not on the slide, which is new as well, is the always-on VPN connection. That is new in Windows 10. It was also implemented in GDR2, but for Windows 10, it is now as well on Windows Mobile as Windows 10 Desktop. And that means that you can, under certain conditions, say, make sure that the VPN connection is always on. So, for example, if you are connected to my corporate Wi-Fi, then you can trigger that VPN connection. But if you configure to the Wi-Fi hotspot, then you're not allowed to do that. So the VPN client that you are using can also use the passport certificates that you have deployed to that device. So you can implement passport in two ways, key-based or certificate-based. If you use to deploy passport in a certificate-based way, then you can also say through policy in MDM that if an application requires virtual smart cards or certificates, then simulate my passport container to be a virtual smart card. So if you have VPN, third-party VPN plugins who require a virtual smart card for authentication, and that happens quite a lot. Then if you have Passport deployed, you don't have to deploy additional certificates. You can just use and reuse those same Passport credentials. And the application, which is important as well, where in Windows 8.1 desktop and Windows 8.1 phone, where we were using a different applications for the VPN plugins. The VPN plugins that we now have for Windows Phone, so if you, for example, look at a Cisco AnyConnect or an F5 or a Juniper, they now only have to develop one universal app. Because we can now use those universal app across all the different platforms. And that will then work as well on Windows 10 mobile as on Windows 10 desktop, which is very important because that will most likely provide a much broader support from all the third-party vendors there, because they now only have to develop one plugin. And we already see all the vendors, by the way, developing these applications, these plugins. So the other thing I want to talk about is certificate management. We have some improvements there as well. The thing that already is available for certificate management is SCEP. So we can use SCEP, and if you don't know what SCEP is the Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol, so not to be confused with the
System Center Endpoint Protection.
System Center Endpoint Protection, which allows MDMs to deploy and manage certificates through mobile devices. They are protected and can be protected by TPM or software on a Windows mobile device. There is most of the time a TPM. A Windows mobile device always has a TPM because that is a hardware requirement. So you would protect that through TPM. The other thing that we are adding to Windows 10 as well is the capability to deploy a certificate through a PFX type container to the device, agnostic to the end user, but meaning that we now can say, okay, for example, with SCEP, and that is why we are supporting it and why I want to explain this. With SCEP, when you enroll a certificate to a mobile device, the private key is generated on the device and marked as non-exportable. Meaning that if I want to use that private key for SMIME encryption, then I can only do encryption on that specific device. I cannot get that key off that device to another device that I'm also using to try and do SMIME encryption. So to do that, I need to deploy the certificate in such a way that the private key is exportable. And that is where we now can use this new feature in Windows 10.4, where the MDM can then deploy a certificate for that user on that device, for example, for the use of SMIME encryption. So you have multiple options now. Yeah. So the other thing that I already spoke about was Passport. So when we deploy Passport in such a way that we are using certificates, like I said, you can use, if you don't have a PKI environment, you still can deploy a Passport solution based on key pairs. But if you have a PKI environment, we recommend for security reasons in large enterprises to use certificates, and you use SCEP to deploy those certificates as well. So through your MDM solution. The other feedback we got from a lot of the early adopter programs, or early adopter customers was, okay, I'm deploying certificates to this mobile device. On Windows desktop, it's not such a problem because we have the certificate management tools on those machines, so we can see what certificates are deployed, what the properties are. But on a mobile device, it's really difficult to, we don't have those tools, so it's really difficult, especially in proof of concept environments where you use the same device multiple times to do enrollment and see what certificates are installed on this phone. So there was not really an application or tool that we could use to read, okay, the application got on the phone, and is the certificate, or the certificate got on the phone, and is the certificate really configured with all the right properties? So now we have the new application called Certificates in the store, and that is already available today, and it will also work on Windows 10 Mobile, so where you can see all the properties of the certificate. And then we go to the almost last slide, so application management. There is quite a lot changing there. We will have the same capabilities as we currently have in phone, where you can configure allow deny list. So you can say, for example, based on publisher or application ID, that if you do publisher, you could say, okay, I allow all Microsoft, all applications that have a publisher for Microsoft, except for the Facebook application. Or I allow all applications from Adobe, except for, or you do it the other way around, you say, I deny to use these applications with publish. So you have all these options and flexibility there, but you already have that today. But it's just important to mention that because you could exclude those scenarios to be exposed. So this common platform, it's important as well. We now have one store where as well Windows Mobile as Windows Desktop can utilize those applications from. A consistent side loading and all user apps and Windows 32 apps can now be deployed, not on Windows Mobile, of course. That will only support universal applications. But the desktop, if you would use it in a mobile scenario, you would now be able to deploy applications as well. And we support AppLocker restrictions. So AppLocker has been extended in itself, and we have CSPs now to control that as well. So everything that I'm mentioning here is configurable to MDM. So it has been extended quite a bit about what was available in the previous version of Windows. There are some. The unenrollment, that's the last one. So whatever we have spoken about today that is classified as enterprise data, which could be certificates, VPN profiles, Wi-Fi profiles, applications that we have deployed, or enterprise data protection, so the files that have been tagged as being enterprise data, they will be automatically removed if we do a selective wipe. So either admins or users can unenroll a device, or the user can also use an Azure AD unjoin. So when they do an Azure AD unjoin and the device is enrolled, the unenrollment also automatically takes place. So in the same way as when we do an Azure AD join that the device is enrolled, it is also unenrolled with an Azure AD unenrollment.
Okay, so just a quick last 1 minute. I know we have talked a lot of Windows 10 mobile features and everything. You saw the wheel of all the different areas where Windows 10 can be managed. We have exactly pretty much a similar wheel for managing Windows 10 desktop and mobile in Intune. So I'm not going to details. All the scenarios which we discussed so far is like what we are going to also support with Intune. This is just a list. You can go back and read through it. The only thing which I'm really mentioning, which we haven't mentioned today so far, is encryption. Today, when you encrypt, like today we can force encryption on the devices, but the encryption key is escrowed to MSA accounts, which is again the same painful experience for IT admin. How do I really recover my encryption keys on any of the devices? Because it's my MSA account, user's MSA account, which has all the keys. With Windows 10, we are changing that. And since you can now log in with your Azure user, you can even encrypt the data and store with the Azure AD user identity. So now it's easy for IT pros to go out and say, now if my organization user, employee come back and say, you know what, I lost my encryption key, how can I really get back? They can have a way from Azure AD to get that encryption key back. That's the extra piece which we haven't talked about today, so just worth mentioning. That's it.
Okay, and the last thing that we need to do is to give away this beautiful Nokia Lumia 930. It's a very exclusive device. Who is using Windows Mobile within their own organization and can talk about that for 20 seconds, which is really cool.
So I use Windows Mobile in my environment with Office 365 to get presentations, use Office Lens and Remote to do demos in front of many people, and get them to buy into the environment. So it's been very awesome, and we've had great success.
Good. I'm also looking for business scenario, 20 seconds. If you go over the 20 seconds, you can't win it.
So right now, the second that they started launching the test Windows 10 environment, I got my bosses to buy about 300 Windows phones, and we have agents out in the field to use them to run through insurance applications and sign them, because they were the only phones that would run DocuSign consistently under any condition, and the Windows 10 test environments that we were putting on them were running them perfectly.
20 seconds. So if you go over it, you lose.
Besides the software company that I work for, I also am the president of youth sports franchise, and all of our coaches are remote in the field, and so we gave them Surface tablets and Windows phones, and they have Office 365 accounts, and so I use the included Office 365 admin to mention.
Very cool.
So our primary use for Windows Phone actually now is I'm in government, so I got a lot of security stuff. So we've been using it to kind of push that envelope, bring us into the cloud, get us using Azure AD, Intune, stuff like that. And then the goal is Windows 10 is trying to bring all of that.
Perfect. I'm looking for business scenario. If you already want a phone, then you're not allowed to.
So I work for an aerospace, so security is a big thing for us. We had a huge BlackBerry base and needed to get a replacement to satisfy our security requirements, get our users to be able to do whatever they do on the BlackBerry, do on the phone. So we actually have 5,000 Windows phones deployed right now, with 18,000 probably within the year to replace our BlackBerries completely and do all that functionality with the Windows phones and add all the Office capabilities as well.
Very cool. So, last one.
We are running 90% Apple phones, and I have to go back and tell my management how awesome the Windows phone is.
He wins. You really need a Windows phone now.
You decide, Summit. Who wins?
You know, I mean, from a pure business perspective, I believe the business case was really good here for the stuff, but he went over 20 seconds, but I'll give him a discount over there. So you'll get it.
Okay. Cool.
Cool, thank
Summit-
you.
Summit-